Hello. Hopefully my audio is okay. Look at my new PNG! Thank you so much, Gravestones. I love it so much. Look at it. I belong here now, in Umineko. Alright, let's see what happens. I'm very excited for this. One second. Alright. Is that for real? I had no clue! Dummy, you're too loud. You'll wake Maria up. Battler was so surprised that he yelled obnoxiously and scattered his cards everywhere. His voice caused Maria to turn over once, but she soon fell back into a deep sleep. Jessica gave him a jab, and he lowered his voice. Still, seriously. Now that you mention it, they really did have that kind of atmosphere, didn't they? Now I see. So George Aniki is... George couldn't be seen anywhere in the room. A short while ago, when Shannon came into the room, George suddenly said that he'd forgotten something in the mansion and needed to go back and get it. Shannon said she would guide him, just like she had on the way to the guest house, and the two of them departed together. Well, there's actually been signs of it for a while now. You know, questions about hobbies and favorite things. I always thought it was a bit much for a passing interest. And look what happened now. Come to think of it, I get the feeling George Aniki's always been overly nice to Shannon-chan. Now I get it. According to the weather report, it looks like it'll be at its worst tonight. It also seems it'll last all day tomorrow, though it should get a little better. Really? Then maybe the boat won't arrive until the day after tomorrow. I hope that doesn't interfere with your work on Monday. I already knew the typhoon would be coming beforehand. Just in case, I made sure I didn't have any plans for Monday, so it's okay. I may not look it, but I really am the type who can plan ahead in his schedule. George puffed out his chest, acting proud. Compared to the calm appearance George always had as the oldest cousin, he now looked amusingly like a little kid. Shannon chuckled at this abrupt contrast. It's no surprise you're so well prepared, as someone who will bring prosperity to his company someday. Well, making a company prosper really is a tough job. Money isn't the only thing that's important. I learned that well when studying under my father. Making a company prosper is like owning a castle and leading your subordinates. My dad really loves reading about great leaders during the warring periods of Japan, a hobby that's probably influenced by the fact that he shares Toyotomi Hideyoshi's name. Much of his philosophy on managing businesses comes from talking about them. Did you know? Takeda Shingen, who was feared as the leader of the strongest cavalry corps in the warring periods, started out with his troops in complete disarray, and didn't have the kind of strong leadership necessary to utilize them well. Is that true? That's a little unexpected. In order to unite his troops, Shingen showed his excellent leadership in many ways. For example, when a soldier succeeded well in battle, he would immediately honor them with a medal. Normally, that kind of thing was put off until after the war, and they were all awarded at once. He continued this diligently while on the field of battle, and immediately showing his appreciation for his troops' military exploits motivated them in an extremely significant fashion. Also, whenever one of his troops was brought down by an illness, he would be the first to rush up to them and care for them, and so on. Takeda Shingen wasn't just the man who led the strongest cavalry corps in the warring period. He was the person who cared the most for his troops throughout the warring period. And because he was that kind of person, all his troops went along with him. The truth was, Shannon had already heard this story several years ago. But whenever a discussion of his father led to this sort of topic, George would always glow and look like he was having a great time. So Shannon just smiled without interrupting, urging him to continue. Of course, in a capitalist world, money determines both your strength and the height of your fortifications. But you can't build up a castle or succeed in war by yourself. Such things can only be accomplished with the support of many subordinates, by borrowing their strength. In understanding this, when I looked at my father's... After understanding this, when I realized... Sorry, I can't read. After understanding this, when I look at my father's back, I realize how immature I am. I can clearly see how much competition he had to overcome before building up all he has now. George-sama, you truly look up to your father. I'm jealous. Sorry. That's not how I meant it. I'm sorry. That's not how I meant it either. The two of them awkwardly look at their feet. Shannon had no parents. She'd been brought up in an orphanage owned by Kinzo, called the Fukuin House. Under the guidance of Kinzo, their honorary director, the orphanage offered members who excelled a chance for on-the-job serving experience. If their efforts met with Kinzo's approval, they'd be able to leave the orphanage and work as servants for the Ushinomiya family. This was considered to be the highest honor for those who lived in the orphanage. Servants from the Fukuin house all took names with the character On in them while they served. So Shannon wasn't her real name. The same went for Canon. All of the members of the Fukuin house were orphans. At least, they were all people who had been separated from their parents under special circumstances. Because of this, the orphans had been taught to think of each other as their only family. That's why it seemed so natural to both of them when Canon called Shannon his sister. And while both Shannon and Canon were working in the mansion today, there were several other servants possessing the On character in their names, such as Manon and Lennon, who often worked in a rotation schedule. However, there were not many servants who stayed with the Ushinomiya family for long. It was standard for them to quit after 3 years, so you could probably say that Shannon, who had been working for 10 years, was a notable exception to the rule. Working as a servant for the Ushinomiya family was a heavy burden to bear, but the pay wasn't bad at all. Working for a full 3 years would earn more than what was needed to enter mainstream society. That was why, even though the orphans realized what a harsh task working for the Ushinomiya family was, they still hoped to be accepted. Maybe the fact that Shannon managed to continue working for 10 years wasn't because she had more willpower than the other servants. Maybe she'd gotten stuck working for 10 years because she didn't have the courage to say she wanted to quit. Kinzo couldn't even trust his own blood relatives, and those excellent servants sent from the Fukuin house were the only ones he could rely on. Because of that, Kinzo would sometimes allow them to wear the family crest, as servants under his direct control, and have them work close to him. You've been working here for almost 10 years now, right? You must have saved up a lot of money by now. I wonder. It's not like there's anything in particular I'd like to buy. After all, a few million yen isn't enough to live off for the rest of your life. So the reason you've been working all this time wasn't to hit some target sum? Yes, that's right. I have nowhere to go outside this mansion, and I've been getting along well with Milady and the other servants. Young servants. The madam does scold me sometimes, but caring for the roses and cleaning the mansion is fun. But that can't be your entire life, Shannon-chan. No, Sayo-chan. Shannon cast her eyes downward when she heard her real name. She understood what George was trying to say and fell silent. There's something I've learned, as I continue to study even after becoming an adult and a full-fledged member of society. A human's life is not as monotonous or short as we thought when we were kids. All school-aged kids have certain fears they can't shake. They wonder whether they'll live the rest of their lives like sleepy classes after a monotonous and boring school day, spending their time in a carefree laziness without anything interesting happening until it's all over. However, life's only like that for underage students. Compared to a human's life, the time they spend as students is nothing more than the blink of an eye, a period where they break through the shells of their immaturity. The inside of the shell might be a hot, suffocating, and boring world, but the world beyond that shell is vast and filled with limitless possibilities. So far, your life has been trapped inside the shell called Shannon. I think you're under the mistaken impression that your life will continue like this forever. Shannon couldn't deny those words. She'd been unable to harbor any clear doubts about her lifestyle, and since she never had any hope or goals for changing herself, she'd lazily continued living the way she always had. And if asked whether this life was satisfying, she wouldn't have been able to nod. She may have been intentionally averting her eyes from the truth. Without George's admonishments, she would have continued pretending not to notice as her real life slipped away bit by bit, neglected. George-sama, is it wrong for me to continue living this way? Yeah, it is. Oh, and by the way, didn't you break one of our rules just now? George immediately gave a strict answer, then broke out into a mischievous smile. Shannon already knew what she was being chided for, and she hung her head again, apparently embarrassed. Didn't you promise not to use Sama when the two of us are alone? I couldn't obey that as a promise. But if it was an order, I would have to obey it. Because I'm furniture. Then it's an order. Yes. Certainly, George-san. As Shannon hung her head, her face red, she said George's name again, this time following it with son. Yes, that's fine, Sayo-chan. George smiled at Shannon. No, Sayo, to praise her small act of bravery. This short exchange alone made it clear how far back their relationship must have stretched. For a long while, the two talked as if the weather raging about them didn't even enter their thoughts. They talked about the many memories they'd built during their relationship that no one else knew about. Except, apparently Jessica knows. And now Battler, but okay. Every once in a while, a flash of lightning would attempt to interrupt them, but this could sully neither the roses nor the time they spent blushing at each other. That's right. I have something I wanted to show you. What could it be? George, who had been speaking eloquently, suddenly started to stutter. Watching him, Shannon seemed to guess something. George timidly searched through his pocket. Something got caught in the depths of his pocket, and just like the stuttering George, it took a little while to get it out. It was a very small box. A small box covered in a deep blue velvet. That peculiar shape was enough to tell anyone what was resting inside. Shannon had prepared her heart somewhat, certain beforehand that this was what he'd been planning. But even so, when she actually saw it, she couldn't avoid blushing once more. George opened the small box, took something out, and held it out for Shannon to take. I want you to take this. I couldn't accept something so valuable. You can't take it? No. I'm unworthy of such a thing. Sayo, this isn't a request. It's an order. Take this ring, okay? That is not how you propose to someone. That's messed up. If it's an order, I cannot disobey. Yeah, that's right. Well done. Shannon, not wanting to show her bright red face, timidly accepted the ring from George's hand while still staring at the ground. That ring wasn't a simple accessory. It was a noble object, meant since ancient times to be offered to a special woman under special circumstances. Therefore, while George could order her to take it, he could not order anything beyond that. Anything beyond that would depend not on an order, but on Shannon's, no, Sayo's own will. So, from here on, I'm not ordering you anymore. Sayo, I want you to give me your answer by tomorrow, without using words. Do you understand? How should I won't order you any further, so this isn't an order. But a ring is something you put on your finger, after all. If you like it, you could just put it on any finger you choose. Shannon had only pretended not to know. She already understood what he wanted her to do. But she was standing at a huge crossroads of her life. Look how late it's gotten. Let's call it a day. George turned away from Shannon, acting just a bit bluntly. I could probably order you to wear it on your left hand. You might be timid and dependent enough to actually obey that kind of an order. But I want at least this last step. To be done by your own will, Sayo. Understand? Yes. So, that's my order. I want you to think about it well tonight and show me your answer tomorrow. Shannon nodded back. Today was the culmination of their many days spent together. This moment certainly hadn't come as a surprise to Shannon. We should be getting back to the guest house soon. If we take any longer, we'll make everyone worry about us. Oh, I'm sorry. I just remembered something I had to do in the mansion, so, I have to go back to the mansion. At a time like this? Is that true? George stared into Shannon's face as he laughed mischievously. He definitely saw through Shannon's lie. However, when he saw how she felt, he could sort of understand that she might be so embarrassed that she'd want to be alone. So, because George realized the meaning behind Shannon's lie, he accepted it. Shannon entered the entrance hall to the mansion with a tottering gait. A mixture of exaltation and uncertainty gave her a feeling that she couldn't easily describe. It swelled up in her chest until it felt like she was about to burst. After stopping for a second in front of the servant room to take a deep breath and calm her heart, she opened the door. Inside, Goda, who had been ordered to take the midnight shift at the mansion tonight, was absorbed in a worn-out crossword puzzle magazine. He looked up for an instant to see if one of the family had come, but when he realized it was a fellow servant, he returned to his puzzle as if nothing had happened. Genji-sama told me to come and help you.
Ah, is that so? That's a relief. I was just about to go check that the mansion was fully locked up, but I felt uneasy about leaving this room unmanned. After all, Cross-sama and the others' meeting looks as though it will continue for quite some time. They might request some tea at any moment.
That's true. Then, what shall we do? Should I watch over...
In that case, forgive me, Shannon-san, but I ask that you patrol the mansion. I will stay here, awaiting the family's orders.
Yes.
Shannon was slightly disgusted. Even though she'd come here to help out as a favor, she was casually being forced to do the job of the person actually on duty. Furthermore, after one-sidedly forcing that task on her, Goda returned to his magazine once again and became immersed in his crossword puzzle. Shannon bowed her head as a token sign of respect for her elder, then left the room to patrol the mansion. Thanks to her being a bit ticked off, she managed to suppress that floaty feeling she'd been having until just now. And anyway, she couldn't let Genji or Kannon see her looking like this. She wanted a little time to herself until her heart calmed down, so maybe going on patrol wouldn't be so bad. She began to hear the tumultuous voices of the family discussion coming from the dining hall. Someone was speaking at great length, only to be interrupted by someone else. This second person also began to speak in a very long, drawn-out fashion, until yet another person interrupted. That kept on repeating. It was as though their displeasure was seeping out through their voices. She'd been told to go to the guest house, so it would be bad if Kraus discovered her. Thinking this, Shannon dashed past the dining hall. Then, she went along a prearranged route through the dark mansion, checking that all the locks were secure. She walked down the hall, checking each window. There were no humans on Rokkenjima other than those connected to the family, so locking up didn't really serve much of a purpose. No one had been in the habit of locking up at the Ushinomiya head family, at least not until Natsuhi had scolded them for being careless. The metal fixtures on the windows were ice cold, and she checked them one by one. And as she checked them one by one, the glow in her heart seemed to cool down.
Butterfly?
At that time, she thought she saw something twinkling across the hall. Twinkling? How could anything be twinkling through the darkness of the hall? She figured she must have been imagining it, but she still held her breath. Grasping a curtain, she fearfully gazed down the hall. However, other than the occasional crack of thunder brightening the hallway, she was unable to glimpse any flicker again. Thunder doesn't brighten hallways, but okay. It must have been her imagination after all. Maybe her heart was so agitated that she'd seen something that didn't even exist. Shannon went back to checking the windows. However, a certain unnerving memory was resurrected in the back of her mind. It was that ghost story, which had been passed down amongst the servants who served the Ushinomiya head family. The mansion had two different masters, one of the day and one of the night. Beatrice, the master of the night, would sometimes fly around the mansion in the form of sparkling butterflies. That was the story. Come to think of it, didn't Kannon-kun once say he'd seen it with his own eyes? Though he got sulky when I said he must have imagined it and refused to believe him. Could it possibly be true? The roar of the thunder gave no answer. I was low-key waiting for the portrait to, blink or something. The second day, October 5th, 1986. Genji tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night, but the thick rain clouds didn't seem like they'd be letting any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing. It seems it'll last all day, after all. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Genji-sama. Kannon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. On their normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to an early morning shift. They were on a special schedule for the 2 days of the family conference. However, unless the typhoon passed today, the relative's stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Shannon thought it best to be prepared for the special schedule to last an extra day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain on the previous night. Even though they'd spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, one stormy night was enough to ruin it. Shannon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he had probably already woken up and was probably already preparing a breakfast as exquisite and elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took a bundle of several keys from his pocket and unlocked the front door. The Ushinomiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokkenjima, so in the past... The Ushinomiya family mansion was the only thing on Rokkenjima, so in the past, they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsuhi had ordered that the mansion be locked up from midnight to early morning. Ever since then, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Shannon, so that Goda could start preparing breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep. Well then, let us begin the morning chores. Yes, sir. The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains stayed closed, the mansion would remain enveloped in faint darkness, as though it was still trapped in the previous night. Following a well-rehearsed procedure, Shannon went around the mansion, opening the curtains for one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, drawing the curtains made it just feel a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't smelled anything yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's prized cooking. Good morning. He tried to greet Goda, who should have been getting breakfast ready, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. Yippee! Yippee! Hi, Kimono, how are you? The kitchen was darkly lit, and not only were the curtains not open, but the fan wasn't even running. It was still cold, without any trace of a fire being lit, so of course there were no signs of breakfast being made either. Did I get a haircut? Something seems different? My entire model is different. This PNG was made by Gray, and it's to match the story. It's in the style of the original Umineko sprite. Though it would have been inexcusable, perhaps Goda had overslept. Even servants are only human. Awesome, I know, right? It's so cool. They sometimes sleep in and show up late. In the rare case that such a thing happens, it's part of a servant's code to hide the unsightly scene before anyone notices, smoothly cover it up, and make sure the family never even realizes that anything has gone wrong. Just working? Ooh, good luck with work. I'm doing pretty good. I took a nap right before stream, so hopefully I'll be awake for the soccer games today. Very excited. Shannon took the receiver of the phone that had been fitted to the wall and dialed the number for the extension line in the servants' sleeping room. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Shannon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. It's coming home? Are you gonna stay up to watch it? Thank you for the hydrate and stretch. Yeah? I feel like it's gonna be a good game. It's not like the Mexico game at 2 a.m. Yeah, that's fair. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Oh my gosh, I can't read today. 10 p.m. for me? Oh, yeah, so that's not too bad. Could the lightning last night have damaged some machine, breaking the extension line? Do you know why England fans say it's coming home? Is it because you've won a World Cup before? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Shannon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. He gave up trying to wake Goda with the phone and dashed over to the servants' sleeping room. Probably what the main reason is that we invented football. Oh, I see. I didn't know that. How long has it been since I stopped sleeping and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was part of Natsuhi's usual morning experience. She always slept lightly, and she couldn't sleep at all without medicine. To Natsuhi, sleep was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still the previous night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. No one would torment her as long as she remained inside this room. And her headache wouldn't get any worse here. This room was the only place she could find peace. So when she left, it meant returning to the world where her husband's siblings kept trying to stab each other in the back. In that case, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? That ridiculous notion brought a bitter smile to Natsuhi's face. She was starting to sound like Kinzo. Though she often complained about Kinzo staying locked up in his own room and refusing to attend to everyone else, the truth was that she longed to do the same. Natsuhi gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob, trying to leave her room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. It was Maria's charm, which Natsuhi had received from Jessica. Didn't Jessica say something about it having the power to repel magic, telling her to hang it from her doorknob? Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from the malice of her husband's siblings. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful. I wonder if I have Jessica to thank for the little bit of peaceful sleep I managed to receive. Then Natsuhi remembered. That's right. Last night, I promised Jessica that I'd give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsuhi opened a drawer on her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsuhi had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst these, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it seemed much more authentic than the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keychain. She had heard that this was a spiritual mirror for warding off evil spirits, and she had been given it specially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been distributed. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power resided in this mirror. Perhaps people thought it could reflect calamity and malice in the same way it reflected light. Natsuhi returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room. Yes? Good morning, madam. It's Genji. My apologies for waking you so early. I'm coming now. What is it? No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they come to wake her in person. Perhaps something bad had happened. Maybe some fatal oversight had been made while preparing breakfast, something that would shame the household in front of their guests. Natsuhi took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever troubles she was about to hear of. When she opened the door, Genji once again gave a morning greeting while bowing deeply. Natsuhi tentatively responded. Good morning. Did something happen? My apologies. It would seem that the telephones have broken down due to the lightning last night. The extension telephone isn't working, so please forgive my coming to see you directly. The extension telephone isn't working? That'll be troublesome. Will it be possible to fix it? I'm afraid we don't know the location of the damage. Later on, I would like to call in an expert and have him repair it. Does that mean we'll be unable to have it repaired until after the typhoon passes? Then it will remain broken down for the duration of our guest's stay. Will that hamper our efforts to care for our guests? We will do all we can to ensure that there are no problems. Very well. I'm counting on you to make sure we have no blunders. Natsuhi let out a small sigh of relief. She'd been prepared for the worst, but damage to the telephones wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. Then again, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Eva. Natsuhi gave her head a light shake. Are the preparations for breakfast proceeding well? As to that, we haven't been able to find Goda. The arrangements for breakfast have yet to be carried out. What did you say? Natsuki was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time, and then come to something like this when the relatives were visiting? Natsuki put her hand to her forehead and shook her head. Well, I suppose he slept in. At any rate, just see to it that someone hurries up and prepares breakfast. I don't care who. Natsuki exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The creepy thing she saw there silenced her completely. It was an unpleasant sight, as though someone had dipped their fingers in a reddish-black liquid and scratched at the door around the doorknob. It was probably some sort of awful prank, arranged by some person who wanted to make it look as though they'd tried to force the door with bloody hands. What sort of prank is this? How awful! I also just noticed it as I came to call you. I will clean it later. Perhaps. This is a vulgar joke by one of the guests. Disgusting. Truly disgusting. Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsuki had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. In fact, it would surely be better to act as though she hadn't even realized that such a prank had been played on her. Natsuki gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with a squeak of her heels. When Natsuki and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Natsuki-san. I heard Goda-san would be making us breakfast too. My stomach's been getting all excited since I woke up. After all, it seems food is all you can look forward to at the head family household. I'm pleased to see that you too are in high spirits so early in the morning, Eva-san. With a weary expression, Natsuki returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive despite the early hour. Then Shannon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice. Shannon, have you still not found Goda? My apologies, madam. I went all over the inside of the mansion and the guest house, but I still haven't found him. Where in the world has he gone? At any rate, breakfast is a higher priority than finding Goda right now. See to it immediately. Yes. Shannon glanced at Genji. It seemed he had something else to report, but was uncertain whether or not the words should come from him. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself. Madam, it's not only Goda. Your husband is also nowhere to be found. My husband? Yes. Even before visiting you, I went to his room to tell him that breakfast wasn't being prepared, but I did not find him there. Furthermore, he is not the only one missing. Rudolph-sama, his wife, and Rosa-sama are nowhere to be found. Not in the guest house? Nor the mansion? Yes. They were not in their rooms in the guest house either. When she'd heard that Goda alone was missing, she'd assumed he had slept in or was loafing around somewhere. However, now that she'd learned that several of the relatives were also nowhere to be seen, she began to take a slightly more optimistic view. Could last night's family conference have continued all night, up until the present moment? If so, they might have wanted to cool their heads after being shut in a stuffy room, going out for walks on their own through the rain. The part about cooling their heads really sounded like something Kraus would say. Goda had probably been summoned to accompany them and aid them in some way. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to understand that preparations for breakfast would be hindered if he did not return. However, maybe the family conference had continued until this very moment, with an atmosphere that would make it hard for anyone to slip out. Yes, that theory would be quite convincing for Natsuki. She remembered the illusion she'd felt that morning, as though the previous night had never ended. When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, weary breath. After all, that banquet of filthy vultures circling Kinzo's property was still going on. Perhaps they are still discussing the inheritance somewhere in the garden, or maybe the beach. At any rate, if we don't call Goda back, we'll never be able to begin preparations for breakfast.
So what are you saying? Are Nissan and the rest still continuing their discussion?
She'd planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsuhi and managed to grasp the situation. Nissan and Rudolph sure are tough. Maybe it's just youth in Rosa's case. Just a bit after midnight, the two of us were so tired that we headed back to bed. Though I do remember that Nissan and the rest were still having a heated discussion at that point. Men certainly are unpleasant when they get all fired up. Natsuhi snorted, her face still blank. Canon, search outside. If you find Goda, tell him to return immediately and begin preparing breakfast. Certainly. Natsuhi-ne-san, we don't know for sure that they're outside, do we? Couldn't they also be inside Father's study?
I see. That's certainly possible. I don't know what path their conversation took, but there's certainly a chance they moved to Father's study and let him in on the discussion.
I can't imagine that Father would willingly let them bring such a detestable topic into his study. You really think so? Well then, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, Genji-san and Kanon-kun, but could you search outside? It wouldn't be that strange for Nii-san to suggest that they go outside for a walk to cool their heads. Even in this weather. I'll go to Father's study. Who knows? They might actually be there after all. Eva-san, I couldn't ask a guest like you to exert herself so. I will go. I can also wish him a good morning while I'm at it. Oh, then I'll leave it in your hands, though I somehow doubt he'll return your greeting. Natsuhine-san, have you always been on such good terms with Father? I don't know whether you could call it that, but I'm sure that I've gained his trust as the wife of the successor to the Ushinomiya family. Then I'm sure he'll at least answer you, right? I'd like to at least have breakfast with Father. Do you think you could convince him to come down and join us? It seems that he thoroughly despises the rest of us, but I'm sure he'll listen to you if he trusts you that much. After speaking so boldly, if you're unable to convince Father and come down alone, then I doubt you'll ever be able to claim that you've earned his trust again. I'm not confident, but I will try. Natsuhi responded, looking discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Eva was clearly mocking her, confident that Natsuhi wouldn't be able to get Kinzo to come down. But even so, Natsuhi would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible and letting Eva go instead. Eva's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsuhi clench her fists slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder. Madam, please take this if you would. And this is? Genji handed Natsuhi a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study had an autolock and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door. But if this key is used, won't you also receive the blame? When the master is sleeping deeply, simply knocking on the door will not suffice. And it would be more difficult to persuade the master to leave his room if he must talk through the door. Please use this. Genji. Until now, Natsuhi had thought of Genji as a cold servant who wouldn't do anything for her since he worked directly under Kinzo. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her gratitude, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Kanon. But as Natsuhi watched them go, the words directed at her from behind were sneering. Well then, you must bring Father with you, okay? After all, it's his son's precious wife who's asking. I'm sure he'll listen to you. We're guests, so we'll just relax here at our leisure.
Quit it, Eva. You're taking this too far. Sorry, Natsuhine-san, but we're counting on you to deal with Father.
Without answering, Natsuhi forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. She'll be the first to go, Eva? Well, I don't know, some people have already disappeared. We'll see. She is rude, yeah. Eva's so mean. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up early. George Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the beds in the cousins' room. First to go today, true. But Maria, who had gone straight to bed without joining in, was completely awake. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, she was met with the loud snoring of the other three cousins. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized that her mother wasn't with her, and she quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousins' room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. If you have to finish a comm but you're not feeling it, how do you motivate yourself? Sometimes I'll be like, I'll work on this for like X amount of time, and then I'll go like play a game or do something else that I want to do, and then I'll get back to it. Other times I'll buy myself a little treat. I think those are my top two options that I do. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she slammed the door shut. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. Thanks for the advice. Hopefully it works. Good luck. After a while, Maria returned, once again opening the door with a lively bang. When she'd left the room, her face had been sleepy, but now that she was back, she looked irritated. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline. Wake up! What? Is it an enemy raid? Surround them! After making sure I was awake, Maria moved over to George Aniki's bed and started jumping on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening. Thanks for waking us up, Maria-chan. You stopped us from sleeping in after that late night. If only you could have been a bit more gentle about it. George Nissan, you really are an adult. I respect that. It'll be 7 soon. Well, it's not really a bad time to wake up. Mama's not here. Aunt Rosa? She wasn't in her room? I wonder if she's already woken up and gone to the mansion. Not here! Mama! Maria kept groaning and looking unhappy. She didn't exactly seem lonely because her mother wasn't around. It was more like she was irritated and thrown off balance because her mother wasn't where she'd expected. If we could just tell her where her mother was, that alone would probably calm her down. But unfortunately, we had no way of knowing where Aunt Rosa was, except that she wasn't here. Anyway, it's time for breakfast, so let's head over to the mansion. That's right! Maria, let's go to the mansion together, okay? I'm sure Aunt Rosa will be there too. Mama's in the mansion? And I'll go there. Yeah, guess we should go to the mansion. Our parents have probably already gone there. Maria regained her usual composure so completely, her earlier tantrum now seemed like a lie. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. Once more, there was a knocking sound on the study door, but there was no answer. He seemed to be sleeping still, and I couldn't wake him. If she went back downstairs and said something like that, Eva would probably be amused and triumphant. And even putting Eva aside, it was problematic that Kinzo had stayed shut away during this entire once-a-year conference, not even coming down to greet anyone. Even the family head, no, especially the family head, couldn't fail to make an appearance. I wonder if I can convince him myself. Natsuhi readied herself and used the key that she'd borrowed from Genji to open the door. Even though she was prepared for the sweet stench, which seemed to eat into one's brain as it poured out of the small crack in the door, she couldn't help but grimace. Thinking that he might still be sleeping, Natsuhi entered the room quietly. When she did, Kinzo was already awake and looking down out of the window. So you're awake. Good morning. How did you get in? Kinzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh, but calm, and Natsuhi was slightly reassured. However, though he was awake, he wouldn't have ignored all that knocking if he was in a good mood. Natsuhi wasn't about to relax. My sincere apologies. I asked Genji-san and he allowed me to borrow the key to the study. Huh. Genji did. If my friend thought it was that important, then I have no choice but to listen. So, what business do you have with me? Well, breakfast will be ready soon, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would join us. I will eat here. Have it brought here like always. But father, this family conference happens only once a year. Please, at least let them see your face. Go back downstairs. Are you asking me to join in as they discuss how to chew up my inheritance after I die? How foolish! Let them speak of such matters as much as they please without me. And if that's what you call a family conference, it's hardly worth leaving my room for it. I'm busy. Do not bother me. His last words carried the threat that any further questions would not be appreciated. Natsuhi realized that adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her. She didn't look forward to facing Eva's sarcasm, but there was nothing more Natsuhi could do. Is that so? Understood. I'm sure everyone will be sorry to hear it, but I will tell them. Natsuhi decided to give up. Bowing silently, she tried to leave the room before Kinzo's spasmodic temper could flare up. As she did, Kinzo spoke to her. His voice was so calm and gentle, it felt like it came from an entirely different person. Natsuhi, it has been quite some time since you married into the Ushinomiya family. Yes. It has been many years since I was first permitted to bear the name Ushinomiya. You sometimes long for your previous family. No. Marriage means abandoning your birth family. I am Ushinomiya Natsuhi. The Ushinomiya family is the only family I can come home to. The only one I am fond of. She truly wasn't exaggerating. Such was the resolve she felt whenever she applied the Ushinomiya family name to herself. And that's precisely why she was so saddened when her husband didn't treat her like an Ushinomiya, leaving her to race about in vain. If Prouse were a woman, and you his husband... No, I won't say that. What do you mean by that? Father? Natsuhi was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now were what they seemed, it would have been more than enough to make up for all she'd suffered up to that point. Forget it. It's just the nonsense of an old man. Kinzo once again faced away from her. He told her to forget it, but Natsuhi couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart. Father? Even though I, Natsuhi, am not connected to you by blood, I am still your daughter. I will most assuredly see to it that your honor and glory and everything you have left behind are protected. You do not have the right to wear the one-winged eagle. However, the one-winged eagle is surely engraved in your heart. That is irrefutable proof that you are my blood relative, one who will inherit the glory of the Ushinomiya family. Some will sneer that there is no eagle on your clothes, but such words are not worth lending an ear to. Only those who hold the eagle in their hearts are my true blood relatives. I now consider it an honor that you were welcomed into the Ushinomiya family. Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsuhi. However, Natsuhi couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her heart that she hadn't felt since long ago, when she had been just a child. Natsuhi bowed silently to his back and left the room. Good timing. How's father? You were taking so long I came to check. When Natsuhi left the study, she saw Eva climbing the stairs, and their eyes met. Eva was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsuhi would leave grudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. However, the way Natsuhi was now, such a frivolous laugh would not disturb her. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. So she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of the one who would protect the Ushinomiya family's glory. Father said he would not join in on the family conference. He says he has no interest in discussing such obscene matters. I figured you'd say something like that. If you fail to persuade father, just say so. How pitiful. I'm beginning to see why father lamented so. What do you mean by that? Natsuhi did not answer. Just as Kinzo had done earlier, she showed Eva her back as she headed down the stairs. Eva finally realized that she was being made fun of, that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsuhi's confidence. Even so, she apparently didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Unable to even knock on the door, she could only click her tongue, make a motion as though scratching at it, and follow after Natsuhi. So, were Nissan and the rest there? Did you ask father about them? I didn't get the chance to ask, but they were not inside the study. Father would never let them into his room to discuss such a lowly topic, so it is unlikely he knows where they went. Let us go downstairs and wait for the servants to return from their search. Breakfast may be late, but how would you like some tea, Eva-san? That would be fine. Eva couldn't hide her confusion at the complete difference in Natsuhi's attitude. She was acting so boldly, and while Eva hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. Unable to find fault with anything, Eva could only follow Natsuhi back to the parlor. When the two of them returned to the parlor, Hideyoshi had been joined by the 4 children and Nanjo. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsuhi had returned. You still have not found my husband and the rest? Yes, my apologies. Also, Kumasawa has started preparing breakfast. She said that she will need just a little longer. The clock read a little past 8. 8 should have been the time to start breakfast. Normally, going over that time limit would be a disgrace to the host. Shannon is now searching outside. Also, no one has seen Shannon either. Even Shannon's missing. Truly, just how many people did my husband bring with him on his little walk? Just how many people had gone missing by now? Now that the number was this large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant, as though the people here were the only ones being left out of something interesting. At least, that seemed to reflect the feelings of the children, and Maria in particular. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. The other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria and cheer her up again. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. It must have been a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before seeing who it belonged to that it was probably Shannon, not Cross and the rest. Madam, excuse me. Judging by your appearance, you still haven't been able to find them. My apologies. I still haven't. That will be enough. You've worked hard. She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't had a thing to eat since the previous night, so their stomachs must be growling about now. They'd probably come plodding back of their own accord before long. By now, Natsuhi was thoroughly exasperated, and started to feel that there was no reason for them to go out of their way in search. I will go to the kitchen to prepare some tea for all the guests. Thanks to both of you for all your hard work so early in the morning. Natsuhi left the parlor, acting as though the release in tension had caused a new surge in her headache. Shannon tried to call to her back, but Natsuhi left swiftly. What is it? Was there something else? Yes. I was unable to find her husband or anyone else, but... Well... Shannon sounded evasive. It looked as though he didn't know where they were, but had spotted something that might be connected to their disappearance. Eva and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words and came over. They'd probably picked up on something strange in Cannon's behavior. "What's going on, Cannon-kun? Did you find Cross, Nissan, and everyone else?"
"Actually, the Rose Garden storehouse looks strange."
"What do you mean?"
"It looks strange. It was, how should I explain it?" Cannon hesitated once more. His tone wasn't at all what you'd expect from this usually fearless boy. Seeing this, Eva and Hideyoshi looked at each other dubiously. "What do you mean? Are you saying Nissan and the others were inside the storehouse?" "No. I'm going to inspect the inside now. I just now came back to get the key, but,
I don't really get it, but it sounds like we've just got to look around inside it. Where's the key to the storehouse?"
"It is in the servant room. Let us check inside the storehouse at once." Cannon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor, saying that he would go check, but then Eva and Hideyoshi followed after him. What was this something strange about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Cannon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but perhaps their curiosity over this something that Cannon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss watching television, Cannon and the rest dashed over to the entrance. Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built so that it was hidden in a corner of the rose garden. Cannon, Genji, Eva, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the rose garden holding umbrellas. They entered a small patch just off the rose garden, which was normally off-limits for those appreciating the garden and only used by those maintaining it. As they dashed down that, the storehouse came into view in front of them. It was quite an old shed, and compared to the flawlessly perfect beauty of the rose garden, it was pretty seedy looking. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Cannon and Genji.
"You two sure are fast. I thought my heart was gonna explode."
"I never knew they had a storehouse way over here." "But, what is that?" When Eva looked where Cannon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Cannon's finger, and was likewise too shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter, and there... Everyone suddenly realized why Cannon had been unable to find the words to describe what they now saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, stuck right on it, there was something that looked like a strange, dark red liquid? Mucus? Or maybe it was some sticky paint. An indescribably eerie shape was drawn on the shutter with some kind of ghastly substance. The rain had caused it to drip down like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. No more beating around the bush. Some kind of mark was drawn there, with a ghastly substance that looked like blood, in a shape that seemed to suggest something ominous. 2 circles were drawn there, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated, and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between these shapes, written closely packed together, were some unfamiliar characters, or possibly symbols.
What a vulgar bit of graffiti. Could this be one of those? One of those magic circles used in demonic ceremonies?
It wasn't surprising that Hideyoshi would say that about such a ghastly shape, drawn with a deep, red, dripping substance. When was this made? Last night, I came here before it started raining, and there was nothing drawn here at the time.
Must do something before anyone else sees this. If they laid eyes upon it, it would cause them great discomfort.
That's right. Even though it's just a shed, I wouldn't want to leave such an unpleasant piece of graffiti alone for even a second longer than I had to.
There's some paint inside the storehouse. Let us paint over it temporarily as an emergency measure, then repaint it again someday when the weather is good.
Genji remembered that he had just recently seen another scribble, and that it too had been made with a strange, dark red substance of the same color as this. That must have been... That's right. He had seen it on the door to Natsuhi's room. Kanon-kun, let's remove this scribble quickly and get back, okay? Even though it's just a storehouse, it's really irritating to have graffiti around the home I was brought up in.
Yes, ma'am. I will take care of it immediately.
Kanon squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous drawing disappeared from their direct gaze, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to a kids program they came across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were poking fun at the kids show at every turn, cackling together. George was enjoying the program with Maria from her perspective. Nanjo sat on the sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps come from the hallway. They were the footsteps of a single person. Did that mean it wasn't the group of four that had just left? It was Genji. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of the servant's virtues, to be gasping for air. He had probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet, and he didn't have his usual trim appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small, silent bow and quickly approached him.
Dr. Nanjo, my apologies. Please come with me, quickly.
What's the matter? As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo went pale. He rose from the sofa, trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV, and the two of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Just as they were about to exit the parlor, they came across Natsuhi, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with the tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsuhi's ear, and Natsuhi went pale too, in apparent shock. Then, leaving the serving cart where it was, the three of them dashed towards the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window.
What's that? Isn't that Genji-san and Dr. Nanjo and that's Aunt Natsuhi, isn't it?
What's up, Aniki?
Maybe something happened. They look terribly flustered.
When Jessica and Maria saw that Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats and that the serving cart had been abandoned in the entrance to the parlor, they also realized that something was the matter. Could there have been some kind of accident? Let's go check it out. It's no fun if we're the only ones left out, right? For some reason, what Battler said sounded extremely indiscreet. But they couldn't deny that they were a little insecure and concerned after seeing the adults run off into the rain without regards to their appearance. Let's check it out, okay? I'm worried something might have happened. Jessica's uneasy words spoke for all of them. Hey Maria, are you coming too? Or will you watch TV?
Wanna watch TV.
Let's go on without her. Maria-chan, we'll be back soon. You keep watching TV, okay?
I don't know how I feel about them leaving a child unattended in these circumstances, but I guess they don't know what's going on. By the time the kids made it outside, the adults were no longer in sight. But Jessica seemed to have a pretty good idea of where they'd gone, judging by the direction they'd been running. Following Jessica, we ran through the rain-soaked rose garden. The wind seemed to suddenly get stronger. The malicious sound of thunder began to ring out like it had the previous night. It felt like an eerie something had surrounded the island and was trying to stop us from moving forward. Jessica, is there something over this way? I'm pretty sure there's a storehouse for gardening tools or something.
What in the world could be going on in a place like that?
Just as Jessica had said, they began to see a storehouse in front of them. They could also see the adults there.
The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsuki was outside the storehouse. Without even holding an umbrella, she looked like she was hanging her head, and her back was facing them. There was Genji, Nanjo, and Natsuki, who had just left the mansion. The ones who'd left earlier, Kanon, Eva, and Hideyoshi, were also there, making for a small crowd of people. But there was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsuki realized that the children were approaching, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide. "You mustn't come any closer! Go back to the mansion!" But despite that, no. Because of that, the kids saw the scene Natsuki was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with its shutter wide open, a faint fluorescent light shone down. And right there was... Ah! Jessica's piercing shriek ran out. But that was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same things spilled out of Battler and George's mouths as well. Eva spread her arms just like Natsuki, roaring at the kids with a bone-chilling expression on her face. "George, take everyone and return to the mansion! Quickly! Right now!" When Natsuki spread her arms, I thought she was trying to prevent us from advancing any further. But that wasn't why Eva was spreading her arms right now. She was trying to stop us kids from seeing that terrible scene. It was her mother's heart, trying to protect the eyes and hearts of us children by blocking our view of that terrible scene by at least the width of one of her arms. Is this some kind of joke? Is it? I'd seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and movies, I'd seen it over and over again. This was just seeing something appear in real life that I'd seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, right? That alone shouldn't... But that suit... It's that old man, isn't it? I get it. Then that's Uncle Kraus. And Kirie-san and Aunt Rosa. Ah! Dad! Dad! You mustn't, Jessica. You mustn't go in. You mustn't look. Dad! Dad! Ah! Rigor mortis has set in across almost the entire body. Most likely, 6 hours or more have passed since death. As far as I can tell by looking at the damaged area, there is a high probability that they were damaged after their deaths. No, I must watch what I say. I'm a general practitioner. Examining corpses is outside my area of expertise. So what does that mean? Just killing them wasn't enough, so they went on to do something like this? The devil! This here's the work of the devil! Aunt Natsuki caught Jessica in her arms, and Aunt Eva caught George Aniki. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. If only there had been someone to catch me too. I wouldn't have needed to have this horrible, evil scene burned into my eyes. No, that's not it. It isn't that there's no one here to catch me. The people who should catch me. They're right there, aren't they? Just as Jessica said, it did look like a storehouse for gardening tools. A lawnmower with extra blades, a grass sickle and a hammer, some carpentry tools such as a saw, piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer. And treated just the same, the corpses of several people had been laid to rest there. No, had been tossed in here! I could tell them by their clothes. The old man and Kirie-san, Uncle Kraus and Aunt Rosa. Beyond that, Goda-san and... Are there still more of them? How many people died? You're kidding me! I can't even count them on one hand! Dang it! I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools, which if used for something other than their intended purpose could definitely be wielded with a naked brutality, or whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Anyway, each one of the bodies jammed in here had been given an atrocious makeup. It wasn't makeup. It was more like their faces had been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into expressions that normal people couldn't make even after death. I couldn't tell where the eyes or the noses were, but but I could find their mouths, because they were gaping wide, their gums exposed. But their front teeth were missing, and even the cheeks that should have covered all this were torn up and laid bare. That trendy makeup you always spend so much time on, even though you're a man, isn't doing a thing now. Ah! Dad! I always thought you were going to hell, but still, not like this, right? You weren't such a bad guy that you should have to suffer so brutally. And Kirie-san, didn't I tell you to stop going out with this guy? There's absolutely no reason for you to end up like this too. They've got no faces. No faces. Dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it! Ah! Battler-san, you mustn't look anymore. There's no way your mother and father would want you to see them like this. For your mother and your father's sakes, you mustn't look anymore. Dead people are supposed to have faces that look like they're sleeping peacefully, right? They've got no faces. My dad and Kirie-san have no faces. I don't even know what kind of faces they were wearing when they died. What's wrong with me? Will I have to see these smashed monster-like faces every time I remember them? That's just great. I didn't want to remember that old man's smug face anyway. Just great. Just great. But why even Kirie-san's face? Kirie-san wasn't a crook. Sure, she'd take me off a bit every now and then, but she was like a cool big sister to me. This is wrong. This is all wrong. At least Uncle Kraus has it better, doesn't he? It's not his whole face, just the side. At least he's got half his face left, right? That's still better. It's still better. No! Jessica filled her ears with the sound of her own screaming, trying to shut out my reckless words. Stop it, Battler-kun. Just stop it. Just stop it. Aniki! Aniki! Ah! Disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feeling of everyone there, I screamed over and over. Well, you know, maybe it was a good thing that Maria didn't come. Father, the ones lying over there are Uncle Kraus, Uncle Rudolph, Aunt Kirie, and Aunt Rosa and Goda-san. Just those 5, right? No. There are 6 people. There's one more person over here. The body Hideyoshi was looking down on now happened to be hidden among the shadows in that mountain range of objects, in a blind spot to George, who stood by the entrance. So, George couldn't tell whose body it was. So, George cursed himself. He cursed the fact that his worst guesses always turned out to be right. So, the one lying at your feet is Shannon, isn't it? Yes, it's Shannon-chan.
Meow meow. Thank you, cat. Can I help you?
George fell completely silent. He shook slightly, his lower lip trembling. Normally, he would have wanted to run to his beloved's body, screaming and crying. However, before rashly running forward, he worked to keep his composure and asked his father. Is Shannon the same as Uncle Kraus and the others? Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George an immediate answer. Or rather, he felt that silence was the only sincere and loving response he could give George right now. When George asked if Shannon was the same, He meant to ask whether her corpse was in the same condition as the others or not. Since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it, it meant her corpse was in the same brutal state. Can I look at Shannon? No, you can't. Why not? After all, I won't be able to see Shannon's face again, right? So, why won't you let me see what her face looked like at the end? Last time you met Shannon-chan was yesterday, right? Yes. I see. When you left her, what kind of face was she showing you? It was a wonderful smile. After he handed her the ring, she hesitated, even though she must have already made up her mind. Then she looked bashful, and ran away because she was embarrassed to let him see her face looking like that. That's the expression that was revived in George's mind. I see. And I'm sure Shannon-chan would have wanted to leave you with that smile in your memory. Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, it was in such a horrible state that it'd make anyone want to cover their eyes. Her head had been smashed in from the side, and no more than half of her expression remained. If the remaining blood-soaked half of her expression had been wiped clean, would that graceful smile of hers have peeked out? But only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hand over his eyes. How brutal. If her face was going to be crushed anyway, then if only all of it had been crushed. He might have been able to temporarily distract George from his pain by making the pathetic suggestion that it was someone else wearing Shannon's clothes. But half of her face had been left untouched. It caused the body so much humiliation, while still proving beyond doubt that the body was Shannon's and no one else's. How inhuman! How brutish! And there, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression into his eyes, she lay at Hideyoshi's feet. Was Cannon. Cannon was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they didn't drip down. But that didn't mean he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who had lived with him in the same orphanage, whom he had loved as a sister, must have been just the same as losing a blood relative. George, I'm sure Shannon-chan is saying thank you. She must be glad you didn't end up seeing her in such a pitiful state. I'm sure she's thanking you for holding strong and showing restraint. I understand. I understand, Father. I understand. George leaned against the outer wall of the storehouse, crouching down limply. Father, I have a request. What is it? I want you to look for me. Is there a ring on Shannon's finger? A ring? Let me see. Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Cannon silently pointed to one of Shannon's hands. Yeah, there is. It's a diamond ring, with a valuable diamond. Must have been pretty expensive. And which hand? And which finger is it on? The ring finger of her left hand. I see. So, Shannon-chan was engaged. George, don't tell me you... Eva, that doesn't matter now. A man made a lifelong promise to Shannon-chan. A man promised her happiness for life. Who that man was isn't the issue here. Being told that by a man is a woman's dream, isn't it? I don't know when she received this ring. I also don't know who gave it to her. However, even so, Shannon-chan took this ring. Then she accepted it, and put it on her left ring finger. I'm sure the man who gave it to her was also happy. To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation and was blurting out nonsense. However, someone who knew of George and Shannon's true relationship would understand the full meaning of those words. I see. Thank you, Father. George stood up. Traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm one. Let's go, Battler-kun. Jessica-chan. If we stay here any longer, we'll get in the way of the adults. You're right. Jessica sniffled once, showing her face to her mother, who had been holding her the whole time, to let her know she was okay now. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual expression, although she still couldn't smile. Battler? Hang in there. Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' bodies. I'm sorry. Crying like hell calmed me down. You idiot, Dad. I bet you're laughing at me. After all that crap I talked about you, here I am crying like a baby just 'cause you died. Well, so what? I guess I just got the gene that makes you cry when your parents kick the bucket. Battler's face was still bright red from the tears, but he had at least recovered enough to fake a smile, if only a bitter one. Kenon, you mustn't remain here any longer either. Take the children and return to the mansion. Natsuki had been standing under the rain this whole time, unable to take a step into the storehouse. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Battler's. Realizing that she had to take on the role of responsibility now that her husband was dead, she gave Kenon those orders. Yes, madam. Kenon rose silently and turned to face me. His face was pure white, almost as though his own heart had died along with Shannon. There was no life in his expression. On an ordinary day, if he'd been told to guide the children through the beautiful rose garden, Kenon might have led the way. But now, there was no distinction between Kenon and the children. They were now just kids of about the same age, suffering the pain of losing those close to them. After making sure that the children were leaving, Natsuki started giving orders to Genji. Genji, contact the police immediately. They probably won't be able to come until the typhoon passes, but they should be able to tell us what to do next. Understood. There's an emergency radio, so I will use that to contact them. When she heard that, Natsuki remembered. That's right. The phones were out today, weren't they? However, they also had a radio, since they couldn't necessarily rely on phones all the time while living on an isolated island. At any rate, they should start by contacting the police and receiving their instructions. Everything else could wait. Dr. Nanjo, is there anything more you can do here? Fortunately, there's nothing I can do. Understood. Genji, could you at least cover their faces with something? Exposing them like this is humiliating to them as well. Yes, ma'am. Genji picked up several dried towels from inside the storehouse, when Eva stopped him with a shrill voice. Wait a second! Stop! This is the scene of the crime, isn't it? Then we mustn't disturb it. We all panicked and walked in here with our shoes on, but even that will surely get in the way of the police's investigation, right? Natsuki glared at Eva, offended. Objectively speaking, Eva was right. Even so, she glared at Eva as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corpses, which had been humiliated even after death, the simple kindness of covering their faces. However, Eva had spoken both calmly and correctly. This horrible situation definitely wasn't an accident. It was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. So they needed to be careful to avoid disturbing the site any further. They had to do what little they could to aid the police, preserving clues that might help catch the detestable culprit. I agree with Eva-san. Until the police come, we should leave everything be. What do you say, madam? You're right. Very well. Close it up. And just in case, we should put a different lock on it. A different lock? Yes. When we came here, the shutter was locked. That meant the culprit used the key to the shutter to lock it. That makes sense. So, does that mean the key that opens the shutter will have the culprit's fingerprints on it? I'm sure it'll be worth submitting it to the police as evidence. But Canon-kun usually has it, and he used it to unlock the shed just now. It'll probably have Canon's fingerprints on it. Also, that key was handed to Genji-san just now, and he took it with his bare hands. It doesn't look like it'll be very useful as evidence. That was careless of me. My apologies. Genji-san, are there any other keys to the storehouse? No, only this one. So the culprit walked out of the servant room with that key, and then was nice enough to return the key to where they found it. Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible, but it was actually very strange if you thought about it. Why would they go to all the trouble of returning a key they stole? No, if you think about it even more deeply, there are some points that are even more bizarre. When a criminal hides a body, they're usually trying to delay the point at which it'll be found, so they can use that time to escape. The six weren't necessarily killed here, but it was reasonable to assume that they were killed somewhere on this island, carried to the storehouse, and hidden to delay the discovery of the crime. And yet, the eerie magic circle scribbled on the storehouse shutter had eloquently indicated the location of the hidden corpses. Sure, it didn't explicitly mention the corpses, but 6 people had gone missing. In that situation, someone had made such an obvious piece of graffiti and even returned the key to the shutter, almost as though they wanted the corpses here to be discovered. Anyway, we can't put all our faith in a lock that the culprit has opened once before. If we want to protect this place from the culprit's hand, I think we should put a new lock on it. I think that's a good plan. I agree. Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed a brand new padlock that had been inside a small box. What should I do with the key? I will take it. I will take responsibility and hand it over to the police. Natsuhi took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. And so, the corpses were once again sealed behind that shutter, which was still covered with that creepy magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. Shutters often have a place in front where you can attach your own lock, in addition to the main lock of the shutter. This was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there ominously. With its closed shutter still covered in a blood-like, creepy substance, it swallowed up the bodies of the 6. To Natsuhi, putting the new lock on wasn't mainly to preserve the scene for the police. She might have felt like she wanted to shut that mouth for all eternity, to prevent that eerie beast from swallowing up any more victims. Come on. Let's go, everyone. Dr. Nanjo, thank you very much for your work. Genji, hurry up and contact the police. I will do so as soon as I return. The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle drawn on the shutter kept the 6 bodies in its throat, looming eerily as the lightning occasionally lit it up. Wow. That's so crazy. Like, I expected it, but not, like, all of them at once. I expected it to be kind of like 1 at a time, maybe 2 at a time. Dang. Oh, and now they're dead. Oh! His corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. His face seems to have been smashed after his death. How unfortunate. Apparently he was originally supposed to be on duty in the guest house. Oh, and it shows, like, what part of their face is gone. Interesting. Her corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. It seems the side of her head was smashed after her death. Don't worry, everyone will be revived in the Golden Land. Her corpse was found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Her face seems to have been smashed after her death. I'll get to see her again, so I don't feel lonely. Are these Maria's comments? Interesting. His corpse was found inside blah blah blah. He has a right to lament his ill fortune. She was chosen by the demon's roulette. That's all there is to it. Oh. this is the beginning of everything. The direct cause of death is unknown, but it seems aside. Okay. Okay. I should have looked at it this way, but okay. Very interesting. We don't have any new tips. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. Hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!